Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. Two Friends. By Guy de Maupassant. Guy de Maupassant's The Two Friends is a short narrative that is both simple and profound. It is a narrative of two friends who meet in Paris during the Franco-Prussian War, which brought them nothing but misery, deprivation, and hunger. On a Sunday afternoon, the two men, Monsieur Maupassant and Monsieur Savage, met while fishing together in a nearby river. They had forgotten their passion as the battle raged, but a chance encounter brought it back to their minds. They can't contain their joy and decide to go fishing again, despite the fact that this was a dangerous activity during the war because their favorite fishing place was located near the territory controlled by the Prussian foes. In spite of the fish, they still decide to go on this expedition because they want to feel like normal people again, free and entitled to enjoy their life once more, rather than a fish. Sadly, their journey comes to an end in tragedy. This is a great narrative based on a very simple premise. In keeping with the premise, Maupassant used basic language, although the simplicity carries a significant portion of the message contained inside this story. Maupassant uses the characters' inner states as the primary location for implementing his topic and ideas by reducing the plot. Only a sliver of the lives of the key characters have been sketched out, with only a smattering of retrospective to set the scene for their meeting at the start of the novel. Because that section of their lives leads directly to death, it becomes vital for them. The protagonists of this novel are the average citizens who suffered the most throughout the war. More than simply hunger and poverty are at the root of their plight, as is the erosion of their sense of self-worth, their right to stay unenslaved, and a host of other essentials. Both of the major protagonists are ordinary folks who enjoy the simple joys of life and never have more than they need to be happy. Their death was neither heroic nor descriptorless, but it was actually heroic in a particular sense. They died with dignity because they did not dishonor their names, betrayed no one, or acted like cowards in the face of death. Even if they didn't ask for help or lower their dignity, their heroism is best represented by their intact humanity and undeniable dread or desire to flee. Both characters accept their doom from the outset of this tragic predicament, knowing exactly what to expect from the minute they got captured. There was nothing more they could do but keep their humanity and existence intact as they walked the path to death. That part where Monsieur Maupassant gets outraged at his fate is the most touching part of the film. Not because of the fishes, but because they represented the lives that were being taken away from them by war, which caused him to be angry at seeing them laying on the seized area. Because they were slaughtered by these warriors long ago, at the very beginning of the war. In the final moments of their lives together, two friends expressed their respect for one another, despite the terror of death that surrounded them. They died together, exactly as they had in their most happy times, just as they had once lived together. Their remains were tossed into the river, a symbolic act that allowed them to spend eternally at their favorite area for relaxing. With his hands folded in his military pants pockets, Monsieur Maupassant strolled along the avenue on a freezing morning in occupied Paris. Monsieur Sauvage, a former fishing companion, is back in town. The two of them used to go fishing together every Sunday before the war, starting early in the morning and remaining until dusk on a river near Paris. In the water, they became buddies after spending all day together with their fishing rods held aloft. They alternated between being completely silent for most of the day and talking non-stop. They had a lot in common when it came to tastes, especially when it came to the beauty of nature's sunrises and sunsets. They were awestruck by the beauty of the landscape outside the town. When they bumped into each other in the street, they shook each other's hands firmly. It was as if the first sunny day in a while lifted their spirits, reminding them of their happy Sundays spent fishing. Monsieur Sauvage even requested that Monsieur M return to the water. Before continuing their stroll, they stopped for an absinthe shot at a nearby coffee shop. It doesn't matter how full they are, Monsieur Maupassant invites Monsieur Sauvage to join him for yet another drink. Monsieur Sauvage questioned Monsieur Maupassant about fishing again since he and Monsieur Maupassant had been drinking, enjoying the weather, and reliving old memories. This is why he informed him that the French still controlled the island from which they were fishing, as well as the bridge leading to it, so he will seek permission to get there. Monsieur Maupassant quickly agreed to this idea because the mere thought of fishing again made him extremely happy. They agreed to meet again in an hour, since they had to return to the store to get their fishing equipment. They walked to the lieutenant's villa, where he gave them permission to cross the bridge. They arrived at the beginning of the river's little vineyards after going through the first set of guards on the bridge. Everything around them, even the surrounding village, appeared deserted at 11 o'clock. For a few months now, the hills around them were full of their Prussian adversaries, who had already occupied France. In their rampage, they raped and murdered the women and girls, set fire to the homes, and starve the people inside. They will offer them some fried fish if they come into contact with any Prussian soldiers, Monsieur Sauvage replied gently when asked. However, they were scared and unsure if they wanted to continue. While walking down a vineyard, Monsieur Sauvage decides to continue their journey, so they ran through the open field to the river. They chose to listen to the ground in order to be absolutely sure that no one was approaching them at that particular location. They were now calm enough to start fishing. In front of them, a barren island served as a watchtower, keeping the opposite shore at bay. On the premises, there used to be a small bistro. Sauvage was the first to capture a fish, and Monsieur Morisot quickly followed suit. Incredibly, they were able to keep on fishing and soon had a full net of fish in hand. They were overjoyed in a way they hadn't been since they went fishing a few years prior. They are suddenly shaken out of their trance by some sort of thunder, and they notice Lieutenant firing his cannons in the distance. Friends begin discussing the current war, emphasizing the kings, republics, and politicians that led to innocent people to die or starve. It appeared as if no one would ever again see the joys of freedom and tranquility. Their conversation turned to life and death, and they realized that someone was lurking behind them. Took the four bearded men with caps and rifles to the island where they discovered that the cottages they assumed were abandoned were actually being used by military. Inquiring about their fishing, a hairy monster approached them, and one of the soldiers had the net with them. Two fishermen are accused by an officer of being undercover spies and are threatened with death because he was the one who captured them. Despite their fear, they stayed mute when he inquired about a password required to cross the bridge. 12 troops line up in front of the two companions after the lieutenant instructs them to do so in German. A minute is all the officer will grant them for disclosing the password. But two of his friends remained silent as he approached the two men and asked them to whisper the password to one another without telling anybody else. In response to an officer's command, the soldiers raised their weapons, and Monsieur Morisot was overcome with both rage and helplessness. As he stammered farewell to his friend, who replied in the same way, his eyes welled up with tears. Despite their shivering, they held hands and shook each other's hands. 12 rounds were fired at the two buddies at the same time, causing them to fall over one another. As the bodies of the victims were being carried away, soldiers tied boulders to their legs and dumped them into the nearby river. Upon reaching his destination, the cop realized he had an overflowing net, so he ordered the chef to fry the fish, which resulted in him relighting his smoking pipe. Characters: Monsieur Sauvage, Monsieur Morisot, Officer, Lieutenant, the Prussian soldiers. Monsieur Morisot and Monsieur Sauvage. In this story, the protagonists are defined solely by the activities they take. They both enjoy fishing for its own sake, as well as the quiet, tranquility, and stillness that nature provides. Because of their love of the outdoors, they take notice of the natural world's splendors, whether it's the splendor of a sunset or the splendor of nature in the late afternoon. It's possible for the two friends to spend a whole day sitting silently in the presence of each other, occupying themselves with their own ideas and enjoying themselves. They're also capable of getting into a shocking debate. They appreciate each other's company, as seen by their reunion after a long period and numerous life-altering events. Fishing and all the other simple pleasures of life that could only be enjoyed during times of freedom were taken from them by war, but the war also introduced new conditions to their lives. As a result of this new reality, they are both thin, hungry, and profoundly disappointed. However, fishing brings back an old enthusiasm in them, and this overwhelms them to the point where they take action despite the numerous dangers. Their escape from the monotony and hopelessness of their new lives was to go fishing and let their guard down, which allowed them to deny the presence of the other and restore their sense of calm. Despite the exorbitant cost of reverting back to their former lifestyle, they remained true to one another, honoring their promises and being friends to the bitter end. They died as a unit, standing at each other's sides during their final moments, just as they had done throughout their lives. They died WTH the feeling of respect towards each other and the life they led, resting at the bottom of the river who gave him so much joy to the end of eternity. In the era of realism, Guy de Maupassant was a well-known French author. He was born in France in 1850, but he was descended from a Normandy-based Lorraine family. In the absence of his father, Guy was raised primarily by his mother. Guy's writing has been influenced by her since he was a child. She passed on her love for literature to her children. There, Guy spent most of his time hanging out with fishermen and conversing with them in their native language. To avoid being put back to his mother's care, Guy went to seminary as a child and did everything he could to get kicked out. He may have developed an antipathy to religion as a result of this period in his life. When Guy finished seminary, he was sent to study acting and poetry at a lyceum. After graduating from college, he enlisted in the military and served in the Franco-Prussian War. Following World War II, he left Normandy and relocated to Paris, where he now lives. For 10 years, he served as a Marine officer there. Gustave Flaubert, a close family friend, stepped in at that point to serve as Guy's mentor and tutor as his skills as a writer developed. Guy began to realize his own aspirations as a journalist. In addition to Zola and Turgenev, Flaubert exposed Guy to many other major realism and naturalism writers. Guy began writing his own fiction at that time, primarily in the form of short plays and poetry. Guy quickly rose through the ranks to become an editor for some of the most prominent publications of the era. At some point, both short stories and novels began to flow from his pen. In 1880, he released Boule de Suif, a collection of his short stories. According to Flaubert, the book is not only Guy's personal masterpiece, but it is also a world literature masterpiece. In a very short period of time, the book became extremely well known. In 1881, Guy's second collection of short stories was published. In just 2 years, a book called The House of Tellys went through 12 printings. Guy's first novel, One Life, was published less than a year ago and sold more than 25,000 copies in less than a year. He had 7 copies of Bel Ami published in just 4 months in 1885, when it was his second work. Guy was handsomely compensated for his magnificent works. He cherished his alone time, but he also took advantage of the opportunity to see the world. He toured Europe and the Middle East, all the while writing, so that when he returned home, he had completed novels to show for it. He knew a lot of influential people in his day and was well regarded in his community, but as the years passed, he became increasingly reclusive. He suffered from a wide range of phobias. That someone is haunting him because of his fear of contracting and dying from his childhood infection with the disease syphilis. He deteriorated over time and died 2 years later. Just a few months shy of his 43rd birthday, Guy de Maupassant passed away in 1893. He was laid to rest in a plot of land in the City of Light. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.